Okay, we can begin, inshallah.
محمد وآل محمد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله طاهرين وطيبين ومعصومين. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for giving me such an opportunity to talk to you and share some thoughts and develop some thoughts together, inshallah, both tonight and tomorrow night. First of all, I like to I'd like to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us opportunity for this month of Ramadan. I also pray that Allah will accept all your ibadah, fasting, and everything that you do in this glorious month of Ramadan. And also I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that all the mustadafin in the world will get the rahmah of the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the zalimeen to be punished for their zulm and remove their power, so they will not be able to oppress innocent people around the world, inshallah. The topic is the sort of challenges facing Islam and Muslims today, and the way forward is a very general aspect. One could talk for days on something like this. But I would like to sort of say that, in our lifetime, mine, I'm sort of much older, but in the current sort of era, we have seen that Islam and Muslims, prior to Islamic revolution, Islam was seen as a fuddy-duddy concept of ideas which belong to the past and no relevant to today. Many of you might be much younger to remember that, but people like myself remember that when we used to say Muslim, we are Muslim, to them it was this sort of Oriental religion concept which really had no relevance. And unfortunately, even to many Muslims, was the same. But the revolution was not just a political concept, but it was actually a revival of Islam itself. And Islam became relevant almost overnight. And it became relevant politically, socially, economically, and spiritually. To the extent that prior to that, people like in Palestine, Kashmir, and elsewhere, to sort of address their predicament and their oppression, they were one day going towards the east, sort of communism, and another day going towards the west and capitalism, and running, like a ping pong between these two, trying to get some sort of direction to liberate themselves. And unfortunately, they were just becoming tools in the hand of these groups and these ideologies. After the revolution, it changed completely. These groups were looking to Allah and to Islam as a solution. And this is very, very important. And that led to suddenly the enemy recognizing the power of Islam and then concentrating to undermine it, realizing that this is the greatest danger that is facing, especially after the fall of Soviet Union and communism. There was nothing else to challenge this colonial sort of capitalistic system except Islam. And Islam indeed was a very real and powerful element. We saw it in Iran, how Shah of Iran, the darling of the United States and the West, and the most powerful in the region, was fall overnight and replaced by the revolution. And even what they throw at the revolution, 8 years of imposed war, etc., all world, all the Arab world, the West and the East and the South and the North, all united to support Saddam Hussein to destroy this revolution as its cradle, did not happen. And Iran became the Islamic Revolution in Iran, became more and more powerful. And therefore, they started targeting it. I remember very clearly that after the fall of Soviet Union, all the papers, all the people were talking about, now that there is no more Iron Curtain, what NATO needs to do is to concentrate on Islamic fundamentalists and so forth. So this nuclear armed forces, sort of international, multinational NATO, was being mobilized and legitimized and promoted as something that will stop the sort of Islam or political Islam. And then we saw, prior to this, there was no sectarianism. Right after, before the revolution, there were 1 or 2 or 3 books, handful, against Tashayyu. After that, there was so many being published that I remember going to mosques in London to sort of request Quran for our mosque in Cambridge. And they were saying, well, we don't have Quran, but we have these books, in boxes and boxes and boxes of sectarian material that they wanted to promote. They started promoting sectarianism. They started multifaceted sort of projects with billions and billions to undermine Islam. They promoted this takfirism, which went in different stages, and the final one is Daesh, and so forth and so on. And they started the concept of divide and rule on one side, and on the other side, social engineering, a new form of Islam on the other side. And these policies, I'm going very fast through them: social engineering, new form of Islam, promoting Islamophobia as a means of undermining Islam on one side, removing the confidence of Muslims in themselves, blaming them even for Islamophobia, and using it as a stick. And the carrot is that you accept American Islam, Islam that separates politics, social, economic, away from spirituality, and then you're supported. You're a good Muslim. A good Muslim is a Muslim that accepts homosexuality, accepts Zionist, and accepts the fact that the religion and the politics is nothing to do with each other. Religion is Christianized. The religion of Islam is just a private part of your life. In that concept, in that sort of promotion, we see then later on with the war on terror and the sort of anti-terror laws which were brought in, not to stop the terrorism which they were promoting in some way, but also but to undermine again Muslims, confidence of Muslims, and showing the Muslims as the problem. This otherization is a process that the West and colonialists have used over and over and over. I give you, what it means is that instead of addressing the needs and aspiration of their own community and their own society, what they do, they sort of demonize one group of people as others, not part of them. And they blame them for everything under the earth, anything that is a problem, economy, anything that is an issue, they say is because of them. This was done by the first time in sort of so-called recent history was done at the time of Crusaders, how they blamed Muslims and demonized them as, and they were collecting taxes for the demon Muslims in streets of Europe, and they mobilized people, not because they were against Muslims in some way, because you have to realize that when Crusade took place was 100 years after Muslims have already taken over Jerusalem and Al-Quds. So it wasn't a reaction to that. It was a reaction to the fact that in Europe, Christianity was losing its power, was losing its relevance. So to strengthen Christianity, they needed to create an enemy. And Crusade was created not to defeat Muslims, but to sort of strengthen Christianity and Christendom. Same thing happened at the time of Nazis. Nazis targeted the Jewish community as a means of demons to mobilize and unite the rest of the society. Same thing happened later on in former Yugoslavia. The demonization of Muslims was to unite a new nation after fall of the Yugoslavia and being divided into different groups and needed a different concept, different ideology to unite people. We see, unfortunately, the same ugly head being promoted in Myanmar, that Muslims are being blamed for everything else and uniting the rest against Muslims and creating a new identity, new unity for that. This process is now being practiced in the West by demonization of Muslims and so forth. Sorry, I'm throwing in a lot here at you without going into details of different things. But we are seeing that undermining Islam and Muslims happening universally. And people say the rise of Islamophobia, but I honestly don't think that particular word is very useful, because phobia is a natural fear of something. There is no reason for fearing Muslim. Islam is actually a solution to the world problem, both spiritually, economically, and politically. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Islam is a solution for humanity. So when they turn it to that, it's actually a deliberate demonization, is a hatred to undermine the validity of Islam, which is indeed, we believe, the best solution for all world's problem. I want to stop here, although I haven't gone too much in detail about different aspects, but let us have an open discussion. Let us start addressing these things. Issues like what is happening in India, demonization of Muslims in India, and this birth to Hindutva. Or let us talk about Palestine, how Zionist, this last apartheid, is actually trying to normalize, not just among the leaders of Arab countries, but infiltrating into the Muslim societies within the West and elsewhere under the excuse of interfaith and so forth. These are all very valid discussions. Let us choose some of these and move forward. I go quiet now, waiting for your questions and your response, inshallah.
What should we talk about? What, Kashmir?
Yeah, talk about India, definitely Kashmir will come.
Right.
We will take it.
Indian about
Naam, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Alaikum assalam.
Okay, thank you for nice presentation. It's my pleasure to have you on the lecture, brother Massoud Shajareh. From your say, you say that Islam is the only solution for all the problem in politics, economic, and the socio-political aspects. So I just want to ask why in currently situation nowadays in the whole world, we can see all of the Islamic country are the country which have a lot of problems, especially from the Middle East, a lot of wars, a lot of everything. All of the problem nowadays in the world, we can see in the Muslim countries. So we say that Islam lead life, but now what happened? Why all this problem, war, and the things like that, political affairs are all situated in the Middle East and the other Islamic country? Thank you.
Okay, very, very valid question. But I think to answer that, we need to learn to separate Islam and Islam Muhammadi, the pure sort of manifestation of Deen of Allah, from those people who claim to be Muslim or Muslim countries. The reality is that just about all so-called Muslim countries are not really following Islam. As a matter of fact, they are fearful of Islam. Because, let's take, the sort of one of the greatest label of what claim to be a Muslim country, Saudi Arabia. If Islam is implemented in Saudi Arabia, we won't see the poor being arrested and have their hands chopped off. The first people who should have their hands chopped off would have been the royal family, who are embezzling billions on a daily basis. So really, the implementation of, if Islam is implemented in Saudi Arabia, those who are in power are the first one that have to go. Same thing with Egypt, same thing with most of these countries. So really, you're not going to see the solution, Islamic solution, being implemented by these munafiqs, these hypocrites, these people who have sold their soul. So really, so we shouldn't separate, we should separate these things. We should separate the Deen of Allah from these sort of kingship, which is indeed is even haram. To have somebody sort of being in power, and then their family and their children, and then their children, and then their children, rather than the most muttaqi person, most God-fearing person, most someone who's actually qualified to make right decision. But in the contracts, when you look at the situation, for example, in Iran, first of all, I don't want to give the wrong impression that everything in Iran is 100% right. As a matter of fact, we could even argue that, there will be things that have to be improved in any society. And but in Iran, we see that despite all the pressures that the whole world has put over 40 years in Iran since the revolution, Iran has gone from strength to strength, vis-a-vis sort of industries, knowledge base. Iran is, in every aspect. Iran, despite all the all the sanctions and all the pressures, Iran not only stood on it has become powerful militarily, economically, regarding science. regarding, the level of universities, participation of women in universities and in politics, all the aspects, when you look at it, the tremendous sort of impact over these years, despite everything that has been thrown, it's true. But I think the more, so therefore the argument is the more you have a system that relies on Islamic principles, Islamic red lines, and so forth, the more successful you are. The more you go and become servant of Taghut, United States, West, and Zionist state, and so forth, you actually become worse off. Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, with all these wealth, they are a slave. They are actually, they don't even have dignity, basic dignity of themselves. They are not, they're not able to be masters of themselves. And so therefore, when I talk about the issue of Islam is a solution, is because Islam is a solution. I'm not saying Muslims or Muslim countries are the solution.
Thank you for that answer. So you just mentioned something about the demonization of Islam, or Muslims rather, that's going on around. So the okay. So everybody here, we're just wanting to get some more like a background about the whole situation in India right now with the Hindutva and the whole Kashmir issue. So maybe if you could shed some light on that a little bit, and then we can kind of get to the whole platform, start a platform through this, and then entertain some more questions about practical aspects of what we can do sitting in a country like Tanzania, which is a third world country, which technically doesn't get too involved with the world politics, but obviously as Muslims, we still have responsibilities living here towards the Taghuti system and the infiltration in our country. So maybe you can shed some light on India, and then we can go towards the general questions.
Thank you for that. I think it's very important, really what is happening in India. And it's been going on for a very long time. From the time Modi was in Gujarat, the governor of Gujarat, and that massacre happened, that genocide took place, and Muslims were slaughtered, and there was no justice implemented. He should have been found guilty and put in jail. But that didn't happen. Not only that didn't happen, what happened was he went from strength to strength. That was catalyst for Hindutva to be created and promoted. And, the ideology which is proudly sort of connects itself to Nazis and organizes on the masses militarily and creates infrastructure of hatred and destruction of anything but those who follow Hindutva, and trying to turn India into a Hindu extremist sort of concept and state. It really is worrying. It's worrying that we have seen over the last number of years, this move is being taking place, legislation after legislation after legislation, sort of discriminating against Muslims, Christians, and others, and promoting and supporting and encouraging these sort of gangs of trained gangs to attack others and create these problems. This is actually very worrying, because where we are heading is probably a sort of a massacre and genocide on the scale which the world hasn't seen. I say that because, we are following the same policy and same procedures as what was happening in Bosnia, but this is much greater, much vaster sort of infrastructure and is much more organized. What happened in Bosnia wasn't as organized, not even a tenth as organized as what is happening in India. And if you want to have a bit more sort of read about this and other things, we have material in on IHRC, which you could on the website, which is ihrc.org or ihrc.org.uk, either of those. Go down there. I mean, recently, only last month, we presented a report for UN, which is on our site, regarding India, on Britain, on Bahrain, and on Holland. And there are a lot more material down there explaining what is happening and what's the worrying aspect is. And Islamophobia is a tool of sort of destroying the confidence of Muslims and demonizing them, creating second-class citizenship, creating otherization, that these are not part of us, these are different people. Then if you demonize a group of people, i.e. here Muslims, to that extent, then what happens is that you create the environment where atrocities could be committed and would be committed by neighbor against neighbor. What happened in Bosnia, the Bosnian Muslims weren't extreme by any standard. They were, well sort of integrated, so-called, and ethnically they were no different whatsoever. But nevertheless, they were picked up. Neighbors came and raped and killed and destroyed even pregnant women or children and so forth, because they were demonized to such extent that they were not seen as equal human beings. This is the process. In Britain, we have seen the Islamophobia is now turned into what we argue, environment of hate. This environment of hate creates a position after politicians and media concentrating, bombing the community day in, day out with messages of hatred and otherization. Then it gets to the point that people end up acting in such a way that they themselves, if they see themselves, they actually don't believe that they could commit these things. We had a case in Britain where someone beat up a Muslim woman who was pregnant in underground. It was filmed. When he was taken to court and they showed this, he was shocked. He said that he's embarrassed in front of his Muslim friends, in the rest of society. He doesn't know how he behaved so badly. The environment is a lot to do with creating that arena where people behave that way. Now, escalate that to sort of the whole nation. Then you get sort of Nazis in Germany, or you will get Muslims in Bosnia, or in Myanmar. A child is just, slung into the fire and everybody stands around laughing. This is what we need to stop. We need to stop that level of demonization. And one of the messages we should give to everyone is this, that wherever this has happened, be it the Crusaders or Nazis in Germany or in Europe, it wasn't just Germany, or Bosnia or elsewhere, the whole society suffers, not just Muslims or just not the victim, immediate victim. The whole society becomes victimized and the whole society loses. So we need to unite with everyone else, make people understand what is at stake, and unite to stop it happening.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Brother, I just wanted to ask you regarding Kashmir. Since government has made a constitutional amendment and they are planning to privatize Kashmir and let other people come and establish, especially Europeans, because a lot of European delegation has visited Kashmir last month or so, and they wanted to set up commercialization over there in Kashmir. So what are the prospect? How do we see that which way one place we can see that the agenda of Indian government is something different to neutralize Kashmiri population, but what is the role of resistance in Kashmir, and how can we support over there? Since I am also an Indian, so I want that I should come to know that what are my responsibility towards our Kashmiri brothers. So how can I also support? And there are some more people who can support onto that part of resistance.
Yes, this is actually very important, and it's something that it affects Kashmir, what I'm saying, but also affects elsewhere. The reality is that they are trying to undermine Kashmiri's right in Kashmir. Kashmir is an occupied territory, is not part of India by international law, and it should not be sort of going through this process. What they're trying to do is to sort of ethnically manipulate Kashmir first and ethnically cleanse it by sort of undermining the legitimacy of Kashmiris to be ruling and deciding the future of Kashmiris. And all the legislation changes is to that direction. And it needs to be challenged. The problem is in Kashmir, in India, in Palestine, and elsewhere, that so-called Muslim governments, which we talked about earlier on, are part of the problem, not part of the solution. And they are, you've seen how these Arab rulers have been promoting and giving at the same time what Modi is doing in Kashmir and the rest of India. They're giving him medals and awards and so forth. But the fact is this, that doesn't stop our responsibility. We need to rise up to these challenges. The way we could do this is, first of all, to educate ourselves regarding what is happening, understand the reality, understanding the direction, and understanding what is very important is not looking at these incidents on a sort of isolated incident. We need to connect the dots of what is happening in India and what direction is going and what needs to be done to stop that direction, rather than having a sort of amnesia regarding what has happened the year before or 6 months before, and looking at every incident like if something has come out of the blue and there is no direction to it. We need to be rising up to these challenges. We need to campaign, we need to support those who are in that area and the victims and their Mazlumeen there. And we need to understand, without resistance by the people there, and without us supporting that resistance in every means that we can do, there won't be victory won. Secondly, we will be answerable on Day of Qiyamah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that this happened, what did you do? And it doesn't mean that we are responsible to resolve it. That is in the hand of Allah. But we are responsible to do something according to our ability, the full of our ability. And that is something that we need to learn, because we are not going to see the end of oppression around the world against Muslims. And indeed, we are not going to see the return of Imam Mahdi alayhi salam, Mahdi alayhi salam, without preparing ourselves to stand up to the challenges of our time. We should do it as individual, and even more important, to organize ourselves to do it as a community. This is in Palestine, this is, in Kashmir, this is in Myanmar, this is sort of going, even Egypt, Saudi Arabia, places like Britain, United States, everywhere else. We have to stand up against injustice. And, we've been told what to do. If you see something wrong, what do? First, you change it with your hand, i.e., physically you get involved. If you can't do that, and only if you can't do that, then you stop it with your tongue, i.e., you speak out against it. And if we can't do that, then you hate it in your heart. This hadith doesn't say just hate it in your heart and get on with your life and go on holiday and enjoy yourself. It's very clear. Those stages we have to do. And the hadith goes on that is the lowest level of hating in your heart. That's the lowest level of iman. I.e., if you don't do that, then you don't even have iman. And I think that one of the problem is, and this is true everywhere, and I'm sure to some extent this direction is happening everywhere. I'm sure it's happening where you are as well, that we are being forced not to do the right thing. Our mosque, our institutions and everything, we are being forced to Christianize our religion. So, we just should be busy with the spirituality. It's none of our business what happens. That is not Islam. That's not the Islam of Muhammad. Resistance and struggle is part and parcel of our deen. Especially those who follow A'imma alayhi salam. All our A'imma, all of them, they challenged the Taghut of their time. They did it in different methodology and so forth. Not every single one took the position of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. But they resisted. They resisted, and the proof of it is that they became shaheed by the Taghut and authority of their time. If they did what most of the Muslims today do, but going and just forgetting about the Zalimeen and just saying, no, I got to get on with it. I do taqiyya. I have just bring bread home and look after my family and have a comfortable life. I just don't say anything, don't challenge anything, don't get into trouble. That is not the teaching of our A'imma. That is not Islam Muhammadi. That is not the Islam of Ahlul Bayt. How can we talk about Ahlul Bayt with one minute, and second minute we promote doing something which none of our A'imma have done? None of them. We actually have to understand resisting and supporting the resistance on every level that we can, as the hadith goes, is our responsibility. If we don't, on a day of Qiyamah, we will be answerable. We're going to be asked. We are not going to be asked for the ultimate sort of solution. We're not going to be asked, why didn't you stop it? And why did it, we're going to be asked, what did you do to stop it? How you became part of the solution rather than being part of the problem. And we know that, as it happened at the time of Karbala, this wasn't just a bunch of, non-Shias and no followers of Ahlul Bayt doing this. There were a bunch of followers of Imam Hussein sitting on top of the high hills, doing dua for Imam Hussein to be victorious and crying. But they didn't go to help. So sitting around doing du'as and crying while you do nothing else to actually, as the hadith goes first, you have to stop it by your hand. If you couldn't do it, if it was impossible to do it, then you go to other stages. And unfortunately, we talk about the bravery and the responsibility and the teaching of Ahlul Bayt, but we behave like Yazid and Muawiyah. This is we would never allow one of our children to be called Muawiyah or Yazid, right? But we have many of us behaving like that. While the real true followers of Ahlul Bayt in Karbala, many of them were called Yazid, Omar, and so forth, but they didn't behave like those characters. And we have to, really, we need to get ourselves in shape as a community.
Second question, brother, is that since this now we can see that unipolarity is diminishing from the world stage, whereas Ukraine and Russia conflict has created multipolarity, where a resistance bloc is planning to get their say on the global stage. So do you think that how will this thing, multipolar system, will affect on the resistance, positive way or negative way? And what will be the positive way? How can, where does it will take on the part of our resistance, that will it support the resistance or it will go? How do you see that? I just want to, I don't have the words to express, but I hope you understood, because this
Yes.
is very important. This is very important. We should know that where it is going, since this is all the sacrifice of Shaykh Qasim Soleimani, Abu Mahdi and Muhandis, Reber and Mozdam. They have struggled a lot, and after that we get this system. Although the challenging of the system is led by somebody else like Putin, but after all, he is also following the advice of Reber, which we can understand through their language. The language of 15 or 20 years ago, what Russia was speaking and now it is speaking, you will find a resistance traits in their language in public forum. So how does it, where does it take, and how will it affect the resistance? Since we have a lot of resistance in, let's say, like Yemen, let's say like Kashmir, Myanmar, then Iraq and other places. So how will it affect on this thing, multipolar this thing?
Yeah. It really is a very important question, and we need to analyze it. We need to understand. You see, there is some people think that what's happening in Ukraine is good because people talking about this right to resist, this right to fight back, to become shaheed, to stand up against oppression, against illegal occupation, this, that, others. But really, these are not the principles that are being established. The principle that being established in Ukraine is the hypocrisy and double standard, that you could sort of, people, I find it very difficult to watch news. We talk about, last night I was watching and the news presenter was saying, these children have total innocent, what crime have they committed to face these sort of atrocities and slaughter? Well, what about the children in Yemen?
True.
What crime did they commit to be bombed day in, day out with the weapons that you are providing for the Saudis to do it. It's not that it's happening and they're not stopping it. They're actually active in making sure that this bombing continues by giving them weapons against international law. They know, it's been proven over and over, that they target innocent civilians, but they still do it. It's against their own laws. In Britain, it's against the law. In the United States, against the law. In Europe, it's against the law to help to be part of a war crime. And they know war crime is taking place. UN has identified it. They know even, I mean, I take it even further. In Yemen, the blockade, which they are implementing, not just Saudis, they are implementing, is killing people because of starvation, because of lack of medicine. And they are actively involved in that. They're not even giving finances. UN announces over and over, not enough contribution is there just to feed the children. Children are going to die. 100,000, 200,000, these are announcements of UN. So what we are seeing in Ukraine is not a new understanding that we should have certain principles. It's actually exactly opposite. It's actually a promotion of hypocrisy, that you could say this in one place, but you can't say it for Palestine. You can say it for here, but you can't say it for Yemen. You could say it here, but you can't say it for elsewhere, in Syria, in Libya. What they have done in the name of democracy, they have invaded. They have destroyed society. Look, Libya was one of the most prosperous Muslim nations. The social services was the envy of even Scandinavia. Anyone who was ill would either got free medical care in Libya, or it was paid for to go overseas. You know, this doesn't happen in Sweden and Denmark and elsewhere in Europe. They destroyed it. They destroyed everything. In what? They said that this is because we want to look after the human rights of the Libyans. We want to bring democracy into Libya. We want to stop atrocities against Libyans. You know, and we still, rest of us are still living in illusion, believing these propagandas. Those who believe that propaganda in Libya are now believing the propaganda in Ukraine. Look, we need to go about principles. It is wrong to invade another country. It is wrong to force yourself on other people for no reason. And it's wrong for you to claim that you got the interests of people at heart while you're actually destroying them. This is true in any part of the world. And I think the issue in Ukraine is the hypocrisy which is being established. And that hypocrisy, establishment of that hypocrisy is so dangerous, which I think is going to make this situation continuing. Look, it's happening in Palestine. It's happening in Yemen. It's happening elsewhere, and they don't care. They actually justify it still. So it's not an awakening, unfortunately, but it's actually the same hypocrisy. And what is happening in, sorry, I'm going to be very quick on this because I think it's important. Look, they want to legitimize and strengthen NATO. NATO, after the fall of Soviet Union, there was no reason for it to exist anymore. What did they come, as I said at the beginning, they said that now we need to have NATO to fight the Muslim Islamic extremists, right? A nuclear armed forces against a bunch of people with Kalashnikovs, right? This is how hypocritical this was then. And then after what happened in Afghanistan, there was no reason for NATO to exist because NATO was a failure. There's a failure before, and it was a failure abysmally in Afghanistan. So immediately they had to come up with some program to revive and legitimize and strengthen the concept of NATO. And they've done it. They've done it now. So let us not buy the lies that we are being told, and let us not undermine our principle of standing for justice, no matter who is the zalim and who is the oppressor. You know, there is a saying of the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ said that stop the zalim, be it your enemy or be it your friend. And the companion said, look, we know how to stop a zalim enemy, but how are we going to do it with a friend? To stop them committing the zulm. And so the issue is that there are standards for us, even in the war. You know this. We don't go around, I mean, in the Iran-Iraq war, because of the command and because it's the command of Imam Khomeini, may Allah be pleased with him, Iran had his hand tied behind his back. He never used a chemical weapon. He never bombed civilians. Even if they hide in the civilian areas, the planes were going, dropping leaflets first, and then doing that. There are videos of bomber going over a bridge trying to destroy it and seeing some civilian cars, not doing that and waiting, endangering themselves to do it later when no civilian will be affected. In Islam, we fight even with standards that are so high. So we cannot excuse anyone undermining certain standards, be it our friends even. And we advise them, don't do that. And this is the beauty of our deen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this enlightening talk. And inshallah, we'll have other questions for tomorrow's session, because I think we're running out of time. Because there's other things, there's a lot more to discuss, but
Yes,
because of time. So inshallah, we'll gather again tomorrow and pick up from where we left off, inshallah. Thank you so much again for your time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be with you, brothers and sisters. And I'm actually been many years, I've been wanting to come and visit you. Inshallah, if you do dua, I will be able to come one day and meet you and share thoughts with you.
So one of the, just a quick one for tomorrow, one of the things that we'd really like to hear about tomorrow would be the practical steps that we over here in Tanzania, who are not very politically active, we don't get involved too much in the politics of the country, what we can do in, as our responsibilities towards the resistance. So inshallah, we'll focus on that a little more tomorrow, inshallah.
Inshallah. May Allah protect you all, and inshallah, we'll discuss further details of how we can move forward for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah tomorrow.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.